All right, good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to Podcast 83, the podcast put on by the Michigan Association of Counties. Of course, we're joined today by Deena, Bosworth, and Meghann Keit. Everyone knows who they are. They had a fantastic weekend, right, guys?
We did.
That's great.
Beautiful weather.
I became a plumber. I
Good.
learned how to do plumbing. That was not very fun.
Deena's new side hustle, if anyone needs a plumber.
Okay, that was not fun. Plumbing is not fun.
Meghann, what did you do?
You know, we got the boat ready. We are ready to put it in the water, although I think it's supposed to snow, so it looks like we have some time to wait on it.
Yeah, well, Michigan in August or April, you never know what you're gonna get, right?
True.
You said you were gonna be done typing, Deena. I can still hear you typing, just for the record. Thank you. All right, this is the podcast brought to you by DTE Energy. Of course, if you have any questions, feel free to type your questions into the chat, and we'll answer those at the end. Deena, we're starting to see some movement, and Meghann as well. We're starting to see some movement on some the budget, the current fiscal year budget, or not the current fiscal year, the upcoming fiscal year budget. What are we expecting here over the next few weeks?
Well, I think this week they're going to start moving the budgets out of subcommittee. So both the House and the Senate are going to start moving them. Those are the initial recommendations by each legislative chamber on what they want to fund and how they want to fund those budgets. They make boilerplate language changes and really kind of set out what their priorities are. That we expect to happen, and then probably full appropriations if they get them out early. So by that, I mean the full appropriations committee can also vote them out to the floor. I don't expect them to move across chambers yet this week. That should take a couple of weeks, but I do expect subcommittee movement. Meghann?
Yeah, I agree. I think we've already seen a number of committees get posted for this week, both in the Senate and the House. Everything from our Health and Human Services budget, the LARA subcommittee that houses the MIDC budget. They're all posting, and I think this is what we expected. And I think the legislature is moving forward as if they want to get a budget done and to the governor by June. That was kind of their original timeline. I know last year was a little different with COVID impacting the budget, but I think they are moving forward, to get this done before they break for the summer. But we don't know exactly how all that's going to shake out with, I think, conversations that still need to be had between the governor and the legislature.
And then you got to throw in the American Rescue Plan dollars. I mean, that's going to be, I think we joke every time we meet with someone, on the appropriations committee, it's hard when you have a bunch of money and you have to figure out what you're going to do with it and how you're going to spend it. I know they've talked a ton about what different priorities they all have. And although it's restricted revenue, like ours, when it comes in, it's still going to have some restrictions on it. They're going to have those restrictions too. But I think because their budget is so much bigger, that they'll have a little more wiggle room on how to supplement some of their general fund expenditures with, American Rescue Plan dollars. And then does that free up general fund, or are they even willing to do that? So I think there's still a ton of questions. They can do what they want in subcommittee, but until those questions are answered, I don't think we have an accurate picture of what the budgets are going to look like.
Yeah, because they could potentially have a tentative budget agreement, and then we get U.S. Treasury guidance on ARP funds, and that just opens up a whole nother can of worms, right? I mean, when that guidance from U.S. Treasury may not come for another month, 5 weeks, and then what happens to the budget? Do they start back over? Do they just focus on these funds? So I think it's, time frame wise, I think it's a positive that they're moving things and getting things done, fairly consistent with years past, with the exception, of course, of last year, but fairly consistent with the timing of years past, right?
Yeah, I will say that. And although the, ARP monies are going to throw, a little monkey wrench into things, a big monkey wrench into things, it was never really until they got targets right at the end of the budget cycle when, everybody met, you had your consensus revenue estimating conference, and then leadership in the governor's office get together, usually leadership in the governor's office get together and set, targets for each budget. So you have X amount of money to spend in the Lara budget or an X amount of money in the general government budget, that they really could finalize all of their recommendations and finalize those budgets. So the delayed guidance from ARP, I don't think it's not going to throw the timing off all that much. It's just going to make it harder because there's so many moving parts.
Now, Meghann had touched a little bit about MIDC, some of the things we're watching in that budget. Deena, you want to talk a little bit about county revenue sharing and where we're at with that in this budget?
Yeah, county revenue sharing is a whole can of worms that once we open it up, it's kind of hard to put the lid back on there. I think, most of our counties remember the shift that happened in 2004, 2005, when counties went off of state revenue sharing and paid themselves out of their revenue sharing reserve fund. That revenue sharing reserve fund was created by this property tax shift. So there was excess revenue. We can say that. I hate using those words, but there were, excess revenue at the local level, and we paid ourselves out of those revenue sharing reserve funds what would be, sort of an equal amount to our revenue sharing payment we were supposed to get from the state. Now, I wasn't here when that happened, but I think it happened because the state was in such dire financial situation that they were going to start slashing our statutory revenue sharing anyway. So we kind of struck a deal. We'll go off, we'll pay ourselves our own revenue sharing as long as we can get inflationary increases on it every year. And so that was the deal that was struck. And that once you exhausted your reserve fund, you came back onto revenue sharing. Well, you came back onto revenue sharing whatever year that was, and for every county it was different. And whatever year you came back, that was what was considered your full funding amount. So if you came back in, 2008 at $500, that's your full funding amount. That's your full funding amount this year. If you came back in 2015, you had that many more years of paying yourself interest. So you came back in a little bit better, or not interest, but inflationary increases. So you were a little bit better off when you came back on as far as increases in the allowable amount. Anyway, long story short, all those counties that came back on before 2014-15 budget cycle were getting cut every year they came back from that full funding amount. So that $500 was getting cut every year. We figured it out to be about $115 million, anywhere between $110 and $117 million of money that was the state held back that they were supposed to pay those counties. So we're asking for that this year. It's a big ask. It's not for every county. It's only for 60 counties. It was only for those counties that came back on early, that no longer were allowing, that the state was supposed to pay them that money. This was a broken deal. This was what they owe them because they withheld that money from them. And so we're asking for that to be restored. If they're going to get all of these American Rescue Plan dollars, now's the year to ask for that money to come back. They can do some shifting around. So kind of complicated, long story. If you have questions, call me. I have, we hired out the work years ago. Stephen, I worked very closely with somebody to kind of do all of this math. They work with the fiscal agencies and the Department of Treasury, and so we're pretty confident about all of it. But we need this one ask first, and then we can tackle other statutory revenue sharing issues after that.
And you would probably position some of those early discussions you've had already as fairly positive.
Yeah, believe it or not, I was a little shocked. I really thought that $100 million ask was going to be a lot. It seems to be met with some understanding and acceptance of the state's responsibility for this obligation. So far, so good.
Great. Shift gears a little bit. Meghann, we sent out an alert last week on some court filing bill, or on a court filing bill. You want to talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, definitely. Budgets are running, but there are policy bills running as well. One that we've been opposed to, while it's been in committee, House Bill 4164, basically requiring all documents that are filed in a court case to be digitized and provided online, put on a website so all of the public can have access to those court documents. I think that everyone wants more transparency and accessibility, but our concern here is that the courts through the State Court Administrative Office are already rolling out their e-filing system. The State Court Administrative Office went to committee and explained that process. They do get state funds for that. They need more state funding for that. But the fact that if this bill were to move forward, basically having this requirement need to be in place by January 1st, 2023, it would kind of have all the counties and the clerks in our courts kind of scrambling and really duplicating what the State Court Administrator's Office is already doing. So really, we don't think it makes any sense. This isn't how any taxpayer dollars should be utilized because it becomes so duplicative. When we already have something that's being rolled out, there's been pilots for these e-filing systems through SCAO. Excuse me. And so I think we just want to continue that process and not recreate the wheel under this legislation. We do have the advocacy center up on our website. There was a direct email sent last week talking about how you can do the phone to action campaign and reach out to your legislators directly. I would also say talk to your judges, your clerks, and have them reach out as well, because this would directly impact them.
Great. Yeah, I'm glad you brought up the phone to action. It's a good reminder that we try to use that as sparingly as possible, but it is a great tool for our members to use to get direct contact with their legislators fairly quickly, fairly easily. So please make sure you're using that whenever possible. Or of course, if you do have your legislator's phone number or direct text is always helpful as well. So thanks for that, Megan. All right, and finally, both of you guys handle various committees here. What's going on in some of our committees? What are we working towards here?
Well, as every year, we work on our platforms this time of year. So each committee meeting, we usually have a speaker. We give a great, legislative update. We answer a ton of questions. But then we also start going through our platforms at the beginning part of this year. And our platforms are the county commissioner's voice telling us what to do on certain pieces of legislation. We refer back to those platforms as what I consider to be like our guiding principles on different topics. And so every spring, we take a good close look at those platforms and change some language, add some new issues, get rid of old issues that are on there that we don't really need to have on there anymore. And so that's the process we're going through right now. I really want to stress that if you have anything that you want to add to that, any issues you want to have discussed, if you are a member of those committees, don't forget to send those in so that we can take a look at them. Want to get them finalized before at the end of May. So now's the time. It's this month and next month, and that's it. We're done. And then they'll go to the board for approval, and then they'll go to the full membership for approval. But this is your time to really weigh in on them. I know, Megan, you have different participation on your committees. You have some of the countywide electeds that really come and weigh in. And does that help with the development of your platforms, you think?
Yeah, I think it does. We get a lot of input from various groups, and commissioners hear from their counterparts too, from the prosecutor's office and sheriff. And so I would encourage, as you talk to those other countywide elected officials in your district, just think about it as from a policy standpoint. Is this something that Matt could, coordinate with these other groups on and help support them in what they're doing as well? So, we're open to it. We have those discussions, around, well, I'll have mine next week. I think we put a lot of time and effort into it. So if there's ideas or suggestions for discussion, please send those in.
Great, thanks. Yeah, busy time of year. We've got, not only are we working on platforms and committees, you're working on state budget. We've got our conference in a couple weeks, so hopefully you've seen information on our conference. Of course, it's virtual, hopefully for the last time for a while. 28th and 29th, I believe. You should see information on that. And then we also host our regional summits coming up in July. Those dates will be posted soon. Those will again hopefully be back in person, and then our annual conference will be this September, end of September, on Mackinac Island. And of course, we're keeping our fingers crossed that will be in person as well. So with that, Derek, do we have any questions?
We do have one question from Brenda Tater in Montcalm County. For administrators new to their position who aren't up to speed with what happened in prior years, how do we find out if we are one of the 60 counties on
You
revenue?
just ask me. You ask me, but one thing that I am gonna do is today I have an email drafted that's gonna go out to the affected counties. So it'll go to the county administrators, it'll go to the county board chairs. And I'm going to attach the document that you can look up and see where your county is. And if you would be eligible to receive those funds. So look out for that. Hopefully I'll get that out before the end of the day today.
And
Great.
that's for questions today.
All right. Well, shorter little podcast today. We'll be off next week. Deena, Meghann, do you guys have anything you want to add?
Just thought we were coming up with a different name for this, not a podcast.
Yeah, I don't know if
That was
we've
a
got
video
that.
podcast.
Video
thing?
podcast.
Is that a thing?
Yes, I sent you an email about that.
I saw the email, Derek. Can you believe it? I saw it.
No, I can't.
I feel like video podcast is too boring. There's got to be some millennial term for this.
All right,
Mac
we'll still work
TikTok.
on it.
Yeah, we
Something-
could do a dance. We could call it the Mac TikTok. What do you think?
There we go. Maybe that's what we need to start doing is TikToks too.
We're getting some suggestions on here.
Uh-oh.
Norman says plumbing podcast,
Thanks, bud.
knowledge cast. Marlene Bromer, it's not a podcast. Here's one that's a little more serious. Brian Kolk over in Nuevo. There is a segment, I believe he's referring to the call with the state budget officials today at 4 p.m. Brian's question is, did we get more information from the feds? And I presume he means beyond what we published Friday with legislative update.
No, we don't have any more guidance yet from U.S. Treasury on the ARP funds. We obviously are hoping to get it sooner rather than later. To be honest, I would expect probably mid-May to see something, early to mid-May, till we see something definitive. Yeah, Brian, there's a call this afternoon we sent out with the state budget director and lieutenant governor. To be honest, I'm not quite sure what they're going to update on since we haven't really seen anything out of U.S. Treasury. So we'll of course have some folks on there watching that as well. But at this point, we don't really have any other guidance other than what we have given you guys last week. All right, anything else?
That's it on the question field.
All right, well, great. Thanks, everyone. Have a great week.
Bye,
Thank
everyone.
you. Bye.